I told myself I was gonna get a haircut before the next week of videos were filmed and everything. I didn't get to it. I was out of town, and now it's all just horrible. Hoodie's going up. That's how we admit defeat with these things. The hoodie goes up, you just cover it, everything's fine. So I'm what you would call a Bloomberg junkie. I love reading all of the updates on financial markets, everything. I follow a lot of gaming companies, and for a while I invested in a lot of them until I started to get uncomfortable with the fact that I was talking about them in a journalistic capacity and I was trading the stocks. So it just felt weird to me. Like, nothing about it was illegal or on paper wrong. It just felt kind of weird, you know, like I might in some way affect the overall trend as a newsmaker of gaming crap. So I don't know. I stopped trading in it, bar none and writ large, but I do still follow it pretty actively. It's on my rotation of different articles. You know, you put in your interests and companies you're watching, and then it'll generate news for you, send you articles on each of them so that you can keep up with whatever sector you are primarily trading within. And EA has been an interesting one over the course of the last year or so, because while they are not a favorite among a lot of gamers, such as myself, for a lot of their anti-consumer practices and choices, how they market and monetize their products, they are a fairly significant force in the gaming industry to be trifled with. They are one of the largest companies, if not the largest, depending on how you divvy up each of these publishers and developers, and it gets messy, but they're a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and they do set the trends with the way a lot of the industry carries out their business. But before we start talking about Anthem, which is what this video is primarily about, it's important to understand that most of EA's revenue comes from their sports titles, things such as FIFA or Madden. Those games are their money makers, where they rake in billions upon billions of dollars every single year. I mean, just to put it in perspective, EA's revenue for this year has been projected around $5.1 billion, and the overwhelming majority of that is coming from recurrent purchases within sports titles, such as monetization in microtransaction form for character packs within FIFA or for new players and updating rosters within Madden. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. The $60 price they charge you when you first buy the game makes up a very small percentage of the overall revenue that EA takes in, which is why during their most recent earnings call, a lot of their investors asked their CEOs and CFOs if they were going to actively pursue, over the course of the next console generation, free-to-play models as almost a semi-exclusive way of going. Because after all, if you make a game free-to-play, such as Fortnite, it's much more accessible and people feel much more willing to spend $3, $4, $5 here and there, people who might not have even played the game if you had to pay for it up front. And I will just say they're keeping kind of hush on that point for the moment, and I don't blame them, because at the end of the day, if you can get away with charging an extra $60 for somebody to play your game, why not? But all of this is besides the point, because while I was listening through the earnings call that EA put out for this most recent quarter, what is effectively Q1 of their 2020 fiscal year, they mentioned basically nothing about one of their most recent and most hyped titles, that being Anthem. I mean, over the course of the entire earnings call, which lasts about an hour of nonstop questions and answers and presentations, they only mentioned Anthem once, and it was in passing by the CFO/COO. He actually holds both positions, a guy by the name of Blake Jorgensen. And this actually made some news. A couple gaming publications have been talking about this, thrown together quick little articles, and I'm sure right now a couple of gaming YouTubers are throwing together videos on this topic as we speak. But to me, the most interesting thing about this is not that Blake Jorgensen and Andrew Wilson and all of the head honchos over at EA didn't mention Anthem. That kind of was expected. It's definitely not one of their star franchises at the moment. It has a very troubled past, and it looks to have a troubled to non-existent future. That's not really surprising to me. What is surprising to me is the fact that the investors and the people asking the questions didn't care about it at all. They could have asked specific questions about that game and about the future of that franchise, but they chose not to. They could have thrown it in as the last quarter of a question in a string of 3 questions that they asked, but nobody gave a crap. And that's what's really remarkable. You see, you should always expect CEOs and CFOs and COOs to try to highlight their positives and ignore the negatives. It's PR 101. I mean, who wouldn't try to focus on their accomplishments and ignore their failures? Everybody does it, especially in a professional capacity. What is interesting is that the investors who don't really have a ball in the court, they don't have any sort of horse in this fight. My analogies are all over the place. Point being, they're just there to find out about the company. They don't care if Anthem is the worst thing that's ever been launched as long as the company's doing fine. And that's kind of the point. Anthem is dead, and everybody knows that it's dead. In the previous earnings call, yes, they talked about Anthem, and Andrew Wilson spun his little corporate spiel saying that he's got a positive outlook on what the team is going to be able to do in the upcoming months and years, and that they're going to be able to save the game, and that everything's great, and they have a hardcore player base, and everything's wonderful and fantastic. Again, par for the course, that's what you would expect. But after all of this, it's become very clear to anybody that's paying any sort of attention that Anthem is a dead live service game. It is dead, and it's not going to be making any sort of recovery. We can wish and hope that it would and will, but it just isn't. EA is basically giving up on it, and so have the investors, which is even more of a thumbs up to EA to give up on the game and move on. And honestly, this is kind of the right business choice for EA. Anthem is not a profitable game. Anthem never was a profitable game. It fell well below their sales expectations. Sure, they got a lot of signups for Origin Access and all the premium subscription services they have now, but that was about it. The game was something that was troubled from the very start, and they dumped it as soon as they could. And despite Anthem, a game that they had been talking about for years and years, that they said was in development for 6 or 7 years from their early prototyping phase, something they presumably spent millions upon millions of dollars on, that game tanked and was basically a waste of their time. They lost money on it. And the company is still very, very healthy. After their Q1 2020 quarterly earnings call, their stock price actually rose by 5% because earnings and profits came in at 25 cents per share. Despite Anthem and despite all of the other problems they've had, games such as Apex Legends and FIFA have come in full force to save the company. And of course, investors are going to say, yeah, Anthem was a troubled child and we should just cut our losses there and move on. Let's instead focus on Apex and FIFA, the ones that we know are going to bring us money. Let's just do that. And of course, Andrew Wilson and all of the other executives are saying, yep, that sounds good. Let's do that. Let's move on. It makes sense. I mean, again, if I were investing and if I owned a lot of shares in EA, I would be very happy that they were moving on. And this is where I always end up getting kind of conflicted with this discussion, because of course the gamer in me is upset that they're just abandoning a game that they said that they were going to work hard to fix and improve. But the more pragmatic side of me looks at it and says, yeah, no, it's a troubled mess. That dog has absolute rabies emanating from every orifice on it. And if anybody who even has the slightest semblance of reason saw it, they would immediately go grab the shotgun and put her down. It only makes sense. Again, my analogies are all over the place. I mean, honestly, where I've landed with all of this, I played Anthem for about 3 to 5 hours with some friends when it first launched, and after about 5 hours, I felt as though I had seen everything the game had to offer. I uninstalled it and moved on with my day, my week, my month, my year, and I didn't feel as though I were missing out on anything significant. Point being, I was never going to become an avid Anthem player. It was never going to hook me. It just wasn't a game for me. So the fact that they're moving on, no love lost for me. To me, basically already the game is dead. I've moved on and I won't be playing it again. And I think the point of this entire video and EA's analysis with regards to Anthem is the same. And that's that most people played the game, are done with it, and are ready to move on. There's no point in wasting time, money, and resources and development talent on that project if they could send it somewhere else, to something that's going to actually be able to pay for those people's salaries, be able to pay for the building and the lights to stay on. It just doesn't make sense to try to keep this dying game on life support. It just doesn't. But that's all from me. Thank you so much for watching, honestly and truly. Make sure to hit the like button. It really does help me. And if I get enough likes on this video, I don't know, 2,000 likes, I think we can, let me check my analytics, see if that's possible actually before I make that promise. Oh yeah, no, that's totally doable. 2,000 likes and I will go get a haircut. I need it desperately, so please. My fate is in your hands. Thank you for watching. I love you all. I'll see you in the next video. Leave your comments below. Peace out. Subscribe. I'm bad at outros. Bye.